Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of Mondays with Mundy. And that's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation at the Union League of Philadelphia at Broad and Sansom Streets in beautiful downtown Philadelphia. Hey, we're going to try something a little different this week. We've done some serious history lately, but we're going to try something a little on the lighter side, perhaps, but still good history, though, nonetheless. And it's all about something that makes the league unique among city clubs in the country, and it's called a club table. And it's all about people, because that's what clubs are all about, ultimately. Think of friendship and fellowship, camaraderie, companionship. I mean, ultimately, that's the bottom line. It's the common denominator to club membership everywhere. And these club tables at the league provide that for the club members ourselves. So let's talk about club tables. If you think of the league as a college or university, they all have fraternities and sororities. And so basically, a club table is to the league what a fraternity and sorority is to a university or college. And that's what these club tables are. And I've got some fun illustrations for you because it's a really fun story, at least the older part. It's going to take way more than 10 minutes to talk about all of our club tables, but at least we can get a start. All right, so let's make sure this is working. And I've got to hit slideshow, and I've got to hit, come on, slideshow from the beginning. Here we go. We did it. All right. So it's 1883, and 3 Union League members, J. Emery Soleil, Daniel Keyes, and Thomas K. Ober, go on a fishing and camping trip to the Adirondacks. And while they were there, they realized they were having such a good time, they should make this a more formal event, an organization. So when they came back from their trip, and they called themselves the Aborigines, all right, that's how they thought of themselves. So they decided they would try and have a little camping site up in the Adirondacks. And so somebody knew somebody in the Adirondack Railway Company. They leased some land. They built a cabin. And as you can see, they call themselves the Kettle Club because there is nearby Racket Lake, and there's some reference to a kettle there that we haven't quite found yet. But nonetheless, though, so this was the first attempt for league members to really organize as a group of members themselves within the club itself. And so these 3 men formed the Kettle Club. They had their first annual meeting in January of 1884. They had their first annual dinner in January of 1885. And they just went on and had a blast because that's what club tables do. They have fun. I mean, they're very social. They really are. I mean, there's a serious side to them, don't get me wrong. I mean, and there's a very serious side to them. I mean, they really are an integral part of the functioning of the league in every way, shape, or form. But there's a fun side, and that's what we're going to take a look at today. So, and the Kettle Club especially, they had a lot of fun. So, all right, you can see this is 1886. So they're already having a dinner, and they had dinners usually in January, but this one was in March. And here they had their 18th annual dinner in 1902. It's Mother Goose's greetings to the Kettle Club, and Mother Goose is a bunch of fairy rhymes, right? So you can imagine what they did with some of these things. So let's just see. All right, here we go. This is the first of the Kettle Club rhymes, okay, if you will. And I'll read it just in case you can't. But do look at the illustration. It's really remarkable for 1902. Sing a song of sixpence, a bottle full of rye, 35 kettlers hustling to get high. When the bot is opened, the boys begin to sing, and isn't that the proper stuff to make the kettle ring? There's a lot ringing in that image, so we'll see what happens with that one, right? And here's another one. I mentioned that J. Emery Soleil was one of the 3 founders, as was Thomas K. Ober. I'll read the Ober one because it's shorter, and I think it's a lot more fun. So, and there's Ober on the right-hand side. Tommy Ober is as sober as a March hare in October. Figure that one out if you would, please, right? So the Kettle Club was the first club table to actually have a designated table in a dining room in the league where they would meet daily, they could meet weekly, they could meet monthly. And they were in a room that is now called the Old Cafe. So it's on the first floor of the Broad Street building. But no club tables meet there anymore. That hasn't happened in many, many years because in 1911, when the middle section of the clubhouse was opened, on the first floor, there were 2 large dining rooms, the North and the South Marble rooms. And that's where the club tables met. And the smallest table, I think, had seating for 6. The largest could be 14. Some tables met every day. Some of them met weekly. Some met monthly, which is still the custom to this very day. So Today, though, club tables meet in a different dining room called the Founders Room, which is where the old South Marble used to be. So that's that. All right. So that was the Kettle Club. In 1891, the Lincoln Association was formed at the League as a more intellectual and historical group because their purpose was to encourage the study of Abraham Lincoln and his administration and his life. But they made the transition from something more serious into something a little bit more fun at the same time. And then in 1904, we had the Wishbone Table and the Hearth Club, and both of those clubs are still with us today, because the Kettle Club slowly died out in the 1930s, but Wishbone and Hearth are still with us. So let's take a look at some of those and see what they look like. So here's the Wishbone Club, and that is their actual beginning in 1904, and it is just a gem of a book to read, full of information, great photographs. And like the Kettle Club, the Wishbone members also took trips. They went down to the Jersey Shore, they'd go to Long Island, the Chesapeake, they would play golf, they would just have parties. But again, as I said, there's always a serious side to them because they were always trying to help the League in some way, shape, or form, which the club still do this day. That's the Wishbone Club. This is a very, very early menu cover. It's actually leather, believe it or not, but hand painted. Mother hen, the mother wishbone, if you will, herself, and all the little wishboners have just hatched, but she's not too happy about it from the looks of it. You can see that they aren't really chicks; they're little dragons. And look at the illustrations; it's just wonderful stuff. And look at the hat on top of her head. And so and she's hitting the bottle too. So, and here we have another illustration from another menu. I'm not quite sure what to call this contraption. It looks like something out of Dr. Seuss, perhaps, with that animal, if you will, pulling it. And boy, it does look like Dr. Seuss. But there, flying on the mast, is the Wishbone flag. Right. Again, driving it again is the devil. So there's a theme here somehow, and for some odd reason. I love the champagne bottle with the champagne floating out, and the cigars at the smokestack. And in the very back, you've got, I guess, the king of the table himself as he's smoking his cigar. So lots of fun stuff going on there. Really good stuff. So, and from another dinner menu at a much later time, they did caricatures of themselves. So think of this as the Photoshop of the day. They were all dressed as a wishbone in some way, shape, or form with their heads imposed on the wishbone itself. So that's that. And the Wishbone Table is, and actually you can go to the Founders Room today and you will see a wishbone, a silver wishbone on the table. And that's how you know that's the Wishbone Club table, and that's where they eat their lunch every day. And here we have a photo from the 1930s. Dinner party, obviously, and the two gentlemen in the middle eventually would become past Union League presidents. Alan Stern on the left and Robert Heiligman on the right, both of whom were eventually judges in Philadelphia. So quite distinguished men. Both of them characters in their own way, from what I understand. So what do we have next? Let's take a look. The Hearth Club, also founded in 1904. So if you remember an earlier lecture on the buildings of the League, we mentioned that in 1893, there was a one-story addition built on the south side along Moravian Street. What would now be the middle of the block. Actually, this is the space that today is now occupied by the Founders Room, where the club tables now meet today. So at the far end of the room, you had that giant fireplace and hearth in front of it. And so that is where the Hearth Club first met and took its name, because that's where they had their table and they were meeting there every day. Today, the Hearth Club meets once a week on Thursdays. And every Thursday, they sign a book. So everybody who has lunch that day signs this member register, and that's how they keep track of who was there. It's a really wonderful custom. So, and God help you if it's your birthday, because you buy drinks for everybody at that time. So, but a good custom itself. So, and let's try something a little more modern, up to speed, and that will go back to the Lincoln table. So these photographs are from the 1980s, and that is Lincoln Hall. And Lincoln table, you wear a Lincoln hat. They still wear them, by the way. They still have them and they still wear them. So this was probably an annual dinner in Lincoln Hall itself. And there's some of them gathered around for a photograph. And there are still a few of them with us to this day. So you never know. Good group of people. And What's next? Here we have, so now we're in what looks, it's Lincoln Hall. It's one of the corners. And there's Sandy Manthorpe and her husband to the left, Spencer, and she's just having fun trying. I'm sure there's a contest to see who can stack as many hats as possible. But there is a more serious side to club tables, as I mentioned earlier. Every February, the league, oh geez, going back 1997, we kind of revived the custom of having a Lincoln Day program. And what made it different is that we now had a march out the Franklin Parkway to the Lincoln statue on East River Drive, where we would have a wreath-laying ceremony. Nowadays, we go to Independence Hall, where Lincoln spoke in 1861. But back then, we would march out the Parkway, and here are some Lincoln table members with their hats on at the wreath-laying ceremony at the Lincoln statue right at the bottom of Lemon Hill Drive. So, and the statue is still there, though now it's off to the side. So as I say, you know, a more serious side to everything. Really sum up club tables, and especially if you're not a league member watching this, you know, what can I say about it? You know, I mentioned how companionship and camaraderie are important, but let me give you those meetings from a league member himself. So this is George W. Elkins. His father was William Elkins. So he was a member of the Kettle Club. And this is what he wrote in the letter. There it is. We actually have it in our archival collection. Isn't that neat? All right. Wrote it to E. Stanley Hart. Dear Stan, last evening on my return from Portland, I found waiting for me the most beautiful loving cup I have ever seen. And when I took it in my hands and held it up to the light, I saw this inscription: the kettle's love for you. For a moment, I could not speak. I was so overcome with joy. And then on the reverse side of the cup, I read the names of all the boys, and my thoughts drifted into a reverie of the times we have had together, a loving memory of the past. And I thought, after all, life is worth living while one has such friends. So I don't think I could have put it any better. I wouldn't even have tried, because again, that's that, you know, he said it best. So this was a rather, you know, we're trying to keep these programs to 10 minutes. Don't take up too much of your time. I hope that you enjoyed this one. There's plenty more material about the club tables, and we can talk more about them. Actually, I will say that they are still very active today. As I said earlier, we have 19 of them. Almost all of them are co-ed. Men and women belong to the club tables themselves. We have some tables that are still men only, or one or two that are women only. For instance, the table 1986 is made up of women leaders in Philadelphia, but they're celebrating the year 1986, which is when women were admitted to membership in the league itself. So you can see where they're coming from on that one. So there's more to talk about in the future about club tables. So I hope you'll come back and listen to it. Next week, we'll be talking about, we'll take a real abrupt turn in terms of our history. We're going to go back to June of 1864 to something called the Great Central Fair that took place on Logan Square. All right, so put your history hats on for next week. So thank you for joining us this week. We appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed it. And above all else, stay safe and save well. So goodbye, everyone, and have a good week.